Moving on now to presentations, we have the annual financial review. Mr. Garside.
Madam President, members of the board, Superintendent Wise, here to talk about fiscal year 15-16 from an overall financial perspective. Every time at this time of year, I put together what's called, it's not really a technical PAFR, a popular annual financial report, but it's really a simplified version of that report, and it highlights all of our financial transactions and summarizes them in a pretty easy format. It's just a few pages long, so our community can have a document they can look at really quickly and say, okay, where's our money coming in? Where's it coming from? Where's our money going? And how do we really rank as we look at other schools in Franklin County and the state of Ohio? So the first slide that you can see up there shows our revenues that we received in fiscal year 2015-2016. What I'd like to point out in that slide is state funding really comes from two different sources. We have the general state funding that's received on a per pupil basis, and we also have property tax allocation. As you know, that would be homestead and rollback. Every homeowner in our community gets 12.5% of their property tax bill paid for by the state of Ohio. You may or may not know that, but a portion of that comes from the state on your behalf. Now, if the district was any district that passed the levy after November of 2013, the state is no longer paying that 12.5%. The taxpayer has to pay that full amount. So we haven't had a levy since then. So that homestead and rollback for us is still as applicable to all of our levies. Overall, our current amount we get from the state of Ohio, and I know it doesn't add up to these numbers, for our current operations is about 56%. The reason why it's off a little bit, other sources was a big portion this year, and those are non-operational revenues. We had a big advance in from our construction fund. We had to advance the construction fund at the end of 2014-15 school year because we have to front the money for this on the state's behalf to build our buildings. So they were giving us 50% of the dollars to build those buildings, but we had to front that money from our general fund in 2014-15, so we got that money back in 2015-16. So that other source is a little higher than normal. But generally speaking, from an operational perspective, we get 56% of our dollars from the state of Ohio. Real estate taxes has remained steady. We haven't seen really much growth in that. As you know, I've talked about this many times, as values increase, our millage rate will decrease and we'll collect roughly the same amount of money. And that goes the other way. If our values decrease, our millage rate will increase a bit and we'll collect the same amount of money. So our property tax revenues have really stayed pretty consistent. Now looking at the expenditure side. On the expenditure side, we are roughly we're only about 3% up from the previous fiscal year. One of the things I want to point out that's important, 71 cents of every dollar goes towards instruction. Now, we'd like that to be a little bit higher, but we do have 119 square miles in our school district. So our transportation, if you look at that, we have a pretty decent percentage there for transportation. We also have the extracurricular costs. We also have plant maintenance, which is our utilities and everything that we need to do for our buildings to keep those up and operational. And other is also things that we're paying some debt out of our general fund. A small portion of that goes to that other portion. Administration is 10%. So overall, we really focus on our instructional piece, and 71 cents of every dollar goes towards that. We have many other fund types in our school district. We have special revenue funds, like ones that you may ring a bell to, or Title I. Also, we have some Title 6B funds that go towards special education. So if you look at those dollars, the biggest one you can see there is our capital project fund. Our capital project fund at this time is obviously the biggest expenditure in our other funds because we have our capital project that's going on. At the end of 2015-16, we were just finishing up our last 4 elementary schools, and so when we do this report next year, that capital projects fund amount's going to shrink substantially because we just completed the whole project at that time. The enterprise fund would be our food service fund. Internal service would be our mostly our insurance, our health insurance, because we are self-funded. We get our best cost if we self-insure ourselves. Special revenue, as I said, is mostly our state and federal grants, and debt service is our portion that we pay to pay off these buildings that we've been building. So a small portion of our overall funds go towards that. Last but not least, so how do we compare with other school districts in the county? I always think this is pretty interesting. If you look at where we are, this is based on, I know it says fiscal year 2015-16, but the information I can get from the state of Ohio is always a year behind. So if you look at the 2014-15 years, our expenditure per pupil is we're 11th out of 16 school districts in Franklin County. The average amount in Franklin County would be $11,993, which is about $1,500 more than we spend per pupil. If you put that into our budget, that would equate to about $32 million extra that we would be paying if we spent the same amount of money that school districts, the average school district in Franklin County does. The state average is about $10,984. We're over $500 less than the state average is what we spend per pupil. That equates to about $11 million more that we'd be spending per year. So that is direct savings goes to our taxpayers because we are frugal with our expenditures, and we're actually spending, if you look at from a county perspective and a state perspective, we're spending less in those two different comparison pieces. Now, where do we stand as far as our millage rate goes? We're currently in the bottom third. That column on the far left includes all levy types, which would mean we have our regular general operating levies in there. We have a 2 mil permanent improvement levy and a 6 mil debt levy to pay off our buildings that we're building. So if you look at all of our levies that we put on our taxpayers, we're still in the bottom third. If you move to that middle column, we are roughly, we're 12th in the county. That's just operating mills. You'll also see there's many districts that are on that list that were out to the ballot in November and passed new levies. Hilliard, Columbus, just to name a few. So their millage rates are going to go up with those new levies. So fortunately, we haven't had to be on the ballot recently for operating dollars since 2009. And at that time in 2009, we promised our taxpayers that we would be off the ballot at a minimum through 2013. We're at the end of 2016 and we still haven't been back, and we don't have, if you are here for the 5-year forecast presentation, you'll see that we have a positive cash balance that runs all the way through 2021. So we're in really good shape financially. And the purpose, like I said, the purpose of this report right here is just to give you a good feel of where we are as far as our revenues, expenditures, and where we rank in the county.